Hello, everybody. My name is Leon. I'm with the Coalition for Racial Economic Justice. We work towards reparations, and we also established the African American Declaration of Independence. Both of these are being circulated around the internet in the form of petitions. Um, but I want to speak to you about something else. It's something that I've termed a continuity of culture. And this is in direct response to the arguments that I've heard from people who are adamant in their stance that they don't want to pay reparations, they did not own any slaves, and they do not want to be held responsible. And I hear you when you say that. It does not change the fact that there has been a continuity of culture. What do I mean when I say that? Laws were passed in the 1800s pretty much the same way they're passed now. They're voted on, and depending on if the measure gets the majority of the ballots cast, it can become a law. And so it wasn't by accident that 12 million African bodies ended up enslaved in the South and in the North and in Haiti and in Cuba and wherever. Back to the continuity of culture. Slavery here in the United States was sanctioned by the federal government and the states. They voted on laws that would ensure the successful implementation of white supremacy here in the United States and the successful transmission of white supremacy globally. That's what America is. That's what it was founded on, and that's what it was set up to do. And so, being as how the plantation owners did not have the financial wherewithal to hire enough workers to work those fields, slavery became a very agreeable solution for them. Industries, slave industries, ship industries, financing, import, export, milling. We are talking about slavery on a scale that set the world aright and ready for an industrial revolution. And it was done systematically through laws, one generation at a time. No one person lives for 250 years, but each successive generation does. And each successive generation agrees by vote and application on a daily basis to continue to reap the benefit in terms of jobs, in terms of homes, in terms of education, and in terms of accumulating resources that are passed down generationally. And who set up persons who are living now to remain in a condition considered privileged. White privilege, it's popular now to say, but most people don't really understand it. And they'll even say, even whites will say, well, what privilege do I have? And a lot of them are really sincere in being ignorant of the fact, and that's not a negative connotation. Ignorance just means that you don't know a thing. they don't know, and so they haven't been able to utilize it fully to their benefit. But that, in contrast, now that's a continuity of culture. That's a continuity of culture in terms of each successive generation reiterating and reinforcing the notion that there is a right to treat humans as less than animals so that society could benefit from 250 years of chattel slavery. And if that wasn't enough, when these persons who had been enslaved were emancipated, instead of paying them their wage claim, the President of the United States signed a document that actually paid the owners of the enslaved at a rate of up to $300 for each body that was emancipated. This ran into the millions of dollars. And they didn't stop there. Southerners received land. They received subsidies. They received education. They received schools that taught them how to go into mass agriculture because the slaves had been doing it all that time. So now that's a continuity of culture that ensured that persons like me, persons like Mary Bazille, my great-grandmother, was a slave. My grandmother was born to her. My grandmother was born of a slave. So at the same time, this continuity of culture was ensuring that one particular segment of society would go on to live in suburban homes, the roads of which had been paved and paid for by that slave labor. But after they were emancipated, they being those enslaved, they weren't given anything. Well, I take that back. General Sherman, in Special Field Order Number 15, set aside 400,000 acres of land for the resettlement purposes, for the purposes of resettling those previously enslaved persons who were located in that region. It was about 18,000 families and individuals who were not associated or related to families. These previously enslaved persons took occupancy of this land, and it's designated on the field order. It's available on my website or on my Facebook page. You can go and get it there. Or just get at me, I'll give it to you. So these previously enslaved persons began to till that ground, and the President of the United States came and took it from them, evicted them, and gave it to the southern landholders who had previously enslaved those persons. So what were they to do? Now there's a continuity of culture for you that lasted for 400 years because the same people alive today were born of those people. And just as it was until relatively recently, now granted, there were others that did march in the civil rights struggle and movement with Dr. King, and we all know that. But black bodies have been falling at an alarming rate. There have been strange fruit hanging from trees, and it didn't just start now. It's been going on. So there was a willingness. There was a willingness to allow this terrorism to continue because it benefited. And the children alive today are in a position of privilege because of what was done throughout those 400 years. So that really takes the air out of anyone's sail that state or who would state that I have no responsibility. This is a social debt, a social obligation, and it must be paid. Peace and blessings.